The world of golf has been rocked by a revelation that no one saw coming. After one of the most chaotic Ryder Cups in history, Rory McIlroy walked into the press room at Bethpage Black and didn't just talk about golf. He lit a fuse that's still burning through the sport. The cameras were rolling, reporters packed shoulder to shoulder, and the room was thick with tension. Everyone expected the usual post-match talk, performance breakdowns, maybe a few jabs at the crowd. But Rory had something else on his mind, something bigger. When he finally spoke, his words sent shockwaves through the game. It wasn't just a soundbite. It was a statement that left fans, players, and analysts stunned. What he revealed would go on to redefine how the world looked at professional golf. The 2025 Ryder Cup at Bethpage Black was never going to be quiet. Everyone knew it. The New York crowd, famous for its fire, had turned the fairways into something closer to a stadium. But no one, not even Rory McIlroy, was prepared for how ugly it would get. From the very first tee, the atmosphere was hostile. Chants, jeers, even personal insults. Nothing was off limits. What was meant to be friendly competition had turned into open warfare. By the time Rory reached the 16th hole, the pressure had built to a breaking point. He stood over his ball, lining up his shot when another wave of boos and insults crashed over him. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was hate disguised as patriotism. Rory stepped back. His composure cracked for the first time all week. He turned toward the crowd and shouted, voice sharp and cutting through the noise, "Shut the fuck up!" That single sentence stopped everything. The crowd froze. The cameras zoomed in. The world watched one of golf's most composed stars explode under the weight of relentless hostility. And just like that, the Ryder Cup wasn't about golf anymore. It was about respect, emotion, and how far a man can be pushed before he breaks. The internet went nuclear. Within minutes, clips of Rory's outburst went viral across every platform. Some fans cheered him for standing up for himself. Others called him unprofessional, claiming he'd disgraced the game. European captain Luke Donald didn't hesitate to defend his star player. He told the press, "There's banter, and then there's abuse. What happened today crossed that line." And he was right. The Ryder Cup had always been intense, but this was different. Fans were screaming in backswings, hurling insults about families, mocking accents. It was beyond rivalry. It was chaos. Even the PGA of America had to step in. They released a statement condemning the crowd's behavior, admitting that a small group of fans had gone too far. They promised tighter security, more oversight. But by then, the damage was done. Despite the storm, Team Europe didn't crumble. They regrouped, focused, and ended the day with an 11.5 to 4.5 lead, a commanding margin that silenced critics and turned the jeers into grudging respect. But Rory's moment had already taken on a life of its own. It wasn't just about a crowd or a match. It was about something deeper, something simmering beneath the surface of the sport itself. When Rory sat down for his post-tournament press conference, the media expected explanations, maybe even an apology. What they got instead was a bombshell. He didn't talk about the 16th hole first. He didn't even mention the fans. Instead, he leaned forward and revealed something that no one had anticipated, that he'd been approached by a rival golf league with an offer to leave the PGA and European tours. The room went silent. In a single sentence, Rory McIlroy had ripped open golf's biggest unspoken secret, the battle for its soul. He spoke calmly, but there was weight behind every word. He admitted that the offer was real, that it came with massive financial incentives, and that he had actually considered it. But then came the line that hit like a thunderclap. "I've always played for pride, for my team, my country, and for what the Ryder Cup means. But the game is changing. Every player is going to have to decide what they stand for." That was it. No names, no details, just a truth bomb that left every journalist in that room scrambling. Within hours, news outlets across the world were running variations of the same headline. Rory McIlroy confirms approach from rival golf league. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Fans debated whether Rory had just opened Pandora's box. Analysts dissected every word, trying to read between the lines. Was this the beginning of another fracture in professional golf? For years, rumors had swirled about rival tours trying to lure players away with massive contracts and shorter schedules, but no one had confirmed it until Rory did. Inside the golfing community, opinions split sharply. Some called him brave for being honest, for breaking golf's culture of silence. Others accused him of stirring division at a time when the sport needed unity. Luke Donald, again, stood by his player. He told reporters, "Rory's commitment to Europe hasn't changed." What he said wasn't betrayal, it was honesty. Even American players were conflicted. Some privately admitted they'd received similar offers, but chose not to talk. Others criticized Rory for being too open. But one thing was certain, the silence around golf's power struggle was broken. Rory's revelation forced a question the golf world didn't want to ask out loud. What matters more, loyalty or legacy? For decades, the PGA Tour had been the ultimate goal. It represented prestige, tradition, and the highest level of competition. But now, new leagues were rewriting the rules. They offered what every player dreamed of: fewer tournaments, more money, more time at home. And for aging players, that was an offer hard to refuse. Golf had entered a new era, one where loyalty wasn't just about flags and teams, it was about survival. And Rory, perhaps unintentionally, had become the face of that dilemma. His comments didn't just hint at change, they confirmed it. Rival leagues weren't rumors anymore. They were real, organized and powerful enough to tempt the sport's brightest star. It wasn't just a story about contracts. It was about the future of competition itself. The timing couldn't have been worse. The Ryder Cup, the crown jewel of golf's tradition, suddenly found itself caught in the middle of a potential revolution. The event relies on players from both the PGA and European tours. If top players started defecting, the entire foundation of the Cup could crumble. Imagine a Ryder Cup without McIlroy, without Rahm, without the biggest stars. It wouldn't just be different, it would be meaningless. That's what made his words so powerful. In one press conference, Rory had reminded everyone that the integrity of golf wasn't guaranteed. It had to be protected. Behind closed doors, PGA officials reportedly scrambled. Talks of increasing prize funds, adjusting schedules, and providing more player freedom began circulating. The goal was clear: stop the exodus before it starts. But the truth was out. The game had changed, and there was no going back. As the days passed, the story grew beyond golf. It became about something universal: the conflict between money and meaning. Rory's honesty made headlines outside of sports media. Business outlets analyzed his decision like a case study in ethics. Fans debated whether he was a hero for speaking truth or a troublemaker for shaking the system. And all the while, Rory stayed quiet again, focused on golf, not gossip. His silence spoke louder than any tweet. It said, "I said my truth, now deal with it." His teammates backed him completely. Europe stood united, refusing to let controversy define their victory. But the questions wouldn't stop coming. Would Rory leave? Would other stars follow? Was the Ryder Cup still safe? For once, the world of golf didn't have answers, only uncertainty. What Rory had really done was expose the truth that everyone in professional golf already knew but never admitted. The sport was at a crossroads. Players were exhausted by the grind, by endless tournaments, by schedules that left no time for family. The rival leagues weren't just about greed, they were about freedom. But tradition still held weight. The Ryder Cup, the majors, the pride of wearing that European blue, those things money couldn't buy. And that's the battle that now defines golf: freedom versus legacy. Rory McIlroy stood in the middle of it, both a player and a symbol. In the weeks that followed, the sport began to shift. Conversations that had been whispered in private were suddenly being held on live television. Sponsors, networks, and even fans started picking sides. Some believed this was the beginning of golf's evolution. Others called it the start of its downfall. But for Rory, the choice was never simple. He had seen what happens when the crowd turns, when passion becomes poison. He had faced the boos, the chants, the insults, and still delivered excellence. So when he spoke about the future, it wasn't just theory. It was lived experience. His revelation wasn't just about business. It was about dignity, about the right of athletes to choose without shame, to be open about what every player faces behind the scenes: temptation, pressure, and the cost of greatness. By the time Europe lifted the Ryder Cup trophy, Rory's press conference had become part of history, not just for what he said, but for what it started. He had cracked open the truth about professional golf, that it's not just about skill and trophies. It's about politics, power, and the quiet wars fought behind sponsorships and TV deals. Even as the cheers echoed around Bethpage, you could sense a shift. The sport wasn't going back to normal. It couldn't, because Rory McIlroy had done what few athletes ever dared to do. He spoke the truth, no matter how inconvenient it was. And maybe that's what makes him one of the greats, not just because of his swing or his titles, but because he reminded the world that honesty is still the rarest form of courage. In the end, Rory's bombshell wasn't about leaving golf behind. It was about dragging it forward. He forced the sport to face itself, to question what it values, and to decide whether it wants to be a game of legacy or a business of transactions. That day at Bethpage, under the roar of thousands, Rory McIlroy didn't just play golf. He changed it. And in doing so, he reminded everyone that sometimes the loudest moments in sports don't come from victory. They come from truth.